Hi, I'm Trixie from Sew Softy, and today I'm going to go through some of the different threads that you can use when you're sewing with kids. Now I'm going to talk about embroidery floss, pearl cotton, and ordinary sewing cotton. Now you can use whichever ones works for your students, or that you just happen to have on hand. But I thought I'd just talk about a few of the advantages and disadvantages of each of the different threads. So first off, we have embroidery thread or embroidery floss. Now it's a nice thick thread, so it means that when kids are sewing, it gives a really nice contrast and a nice decorative line to their work. Disadvantage is, because it's a thicker thread, it means the kids are going to have to use a bigger needle, a thicker needle to sew with, because the thicker thread needs a needle with a bigger eye, and if you have a bigger eye, it means you have a thicker needle. So what's going to happen is the kids are just going to need a little bit more effort when they're sewing with this thicker needle. So as you can see, it just means I've got to put the needle through, and it requires just a bit more of a tug. Okay, so that's embroidery floss. Now the second one I'm going to talk about is pearl cotton. Pearl cotton comes in different thicknesses. This is just size 8, which is a nice sort of thickness for kids to use. And one of the advantages of pearl cotton is it can actually be doubled over when kids are sewing. So you'll need a slightly smaller needle than the one you're using for embroidery floss. So it's a small needle, which is good. You can also double over the thread when you're using it, and tie a knot. And the advantage of doubling over your thread and tying a knot means that the needle won't pull off the thread when kids are sewing. Sometimes when kids are sewing, if you don't have the thread doubled and knotted, the needle keeps on pulling off, and it makes it a little bit frustrating for kids and a little bit difficult for teachers who need to keep helping the kids rethread. Okay, and the last one I'm going to just talk about quickly is ordinary everyday sewing cotton. Now, one of the real great advantages of this, because it's a really thin thread, it means you need to use a really thin, small needle. You can double your thread over, tie knots so the needle's not going to come off. And what happens is, when you have, I'll just show you, this is the needle here, a really small, thinnish needle. It's going to make it much easier for the kids to pull the needle through their threads. Disadvantage though is the little knot at the end is really small and thin, so that when kids are sewing, if they just pull, the knot will come through. But what you need to do is just do a little double stitch or anchor stitch to secure that thread into place. Now, I use ordinary sewing cotton when I sew with kids. I really like it because it's that thin needle that makes sewing really easy for kids that I like. So even if you've got felt that's a little bit thick or a little bit stiffer, that thin needle makes it really easy for kids to sew and get through. And also I like the fact that there's a knot at the end, the thread's double over, so that needle isn't continually pulling off the thread. There is also this other thread, it's also ordinary sewing cotton, but some companies like Orifel and Gutermann make a slightly thicker sewing thread, which is nice. So if you can see, it's just a bit thicker than ordinary sewing cotton. I don't know if you can see that. It's a slightly thicker thread. It's this particular one is multicolored, which is really fun for kids to use. Like I said, it's easy. You can use that same really small needle. I use a chenille 24 when I'm sewing with sewing thread, and it's just my favorite thread. But again, you can use whichever thread works for you, works for your students, you just happen to have on hand. You just know that there are differences. Some threads are thicker, thinner, bigger needles, smaller needles. It doesn't matter in the end. If the kids can sew and they're happy, then that's really great. So if you have any questions, don't forget, just put them in the comments, or you can email me at trixie@sewasofty.com. Bye.